俾你聽嘅時間。今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第64節。呢一節叫做 Treating of the adventure which gave Don Quixote more unhappiness than all that had hitherto befallen him。再一回咧就講到 Don Quixote 同埋 Sancho 喺 galley 上面遇到女扮男裝嘅呢位雪匠，佢叫做 Ana Felix。佢本身係一個 Moorish， 但係咧佢係一個天主教徒，亦都決心咧要離開回教國家而去歐洲嘅國度。當中佢亦都帶埋咗一個年輕貌美嘅美男子叫做 Don Gaspar。而家大家正係籌備緊點樣翻去非洲，就揾翻呢個 Don Gaspar 救翻佢出嚟。而暫時呢個 Ana Felix 就寄宿喺 Don Antonio 嘅屋企，同 Don Quixote 同 Sancho 一樣，都係 Antonio 嘅座上客。好，我哋睇下呢自己眾人點樣就住 Ana Felix 去推動呢個故事。
The wife of Don Antonio Moreno, so the history says, was extremely happy to see Ana Felix in her house. She welcomed her with great kindness, charmed as well by her beauty as by her intelligence, for in both respects the fair Morisco was richly endowed, and all the people of the city flocked to see her as though they had been summoned by the ringing of the bells. Don Quixote told Don Antonio that the plan adopted for releasing Don Gregorio was not a good one, for its risks were greater than its advantages, and that it would be better to land himself with his arms and horse in Barbary, for he would carry him off in spite of the whole Moorish host, as Don Gayferos carried off his wife Melisendra. Remember, your worship, observed Sancho on hearing him say so. Signor Don Gayferos carried off his wife from the mainland and took her to France by land. But in this case, if by chance we carry off Don Gregorio, we have no way of bringing him to Spain, for there's the sea between. There's a remedy for everything except death, said Don Quixote. If they bring the vessel close to the shore, we shall be able to get on board, though all the world strive to prevent us. Your worship hits it off mighty well and mighty easy, said Sancho, but it's a long step from saying to doing, and I hold to the renegade, for he seems to me an honest, good-hearted fellow. Don Antonio then said that if the renegade did not prove successful, the expedient of the great Don Quixote's expedition to Barbary should be adopted. 2 days afterwards, the renegade put to sea in a light vessel of 6 oars a side, manned by a stout crew, and 2 days later the galleys made sail eastward, the general having begged the viceroy to let him know all about the release of Don Gregorio and about Ana Felix, and the viceroy promised to do as he requested. One morning, as Don Quixote went out for a stroll along the beach, arrayed in full armor, he saw coming towards him a knight, also in full armor, with a shining moon painted on his shield, who, on approaching sufficiently near to be heard, said in a loud voice, addressing himself to Don Quixote, illustrious knight, and never sufficiently extolled Don Quixote of La Mancha, I am the Knight of the White Moon, whose unheard-of achievements will perhaps have recalled him to thy memory. I come to do battle with thee and prove the might of thy arm, to the end that I make thee acknowledge and confess that my lady, let her be who she may, is incomparably fairer than thy Dulcinea del Toboso. If thou dost acknowledge this fairly and openly, thou shalt escape death and save me the trouble of inflicting it upon thee. If thou fightest and I vanquish thee, I demand no other satisfaction than that, laying aside arms and abstaining from going in quest of adventures, thou withdraw and betake thyself to thine own village for the space of a year, and live there without putting hand to sword, in peace and quiet and beneficial repose, the same being needful for the increase of thy substance and the salvation of thy soul. And if thou dost vanquish me, my head shall be at thy disposal, my arms and horse thy spoils, and the renown of my deeds transferred and added to thine. Consider which will be thy best course, and give me thy answer speedily, for this day is all the time I have for the dispatch of this business. Don Quixote was amazed and astonished, as well at the Knight of the White Moon's arrogance, as at his reason for delivering the defiance, and with calm dignity he answered him, Knight of the White Moon, of whose achievements I have never heard until now, I will venture to swear you have never seen the illustrious Dulcinea. For had you seen her, I know you would have taken care not to venture yourself upon this issue, because the sight would have removed all doubt from your mind that there ever has been or can be a beauty to be compared with hers. And so, not saying you lie, but merely that you are not correct in what you state, I accept your challenge, with the conditions you have proposed, and at once, that the day you have fixed may not expire. And from your conditions I accept only that of the renown of your achievements being transferred to me. For I know not of what sort they are, nor what they may amount to. I am satisfied with my own, such as they be. Take, therefore, the side of the field you choose, and I will do the same. And to whom God shall give it may St. Peter add his blessing. The Knight of the White Moon had been seen from the city, and it was told the Viceroy how he was in conversation with Don Quixote. The Viceroy, fancying it must be some fresh adventure got up by Don Antonio Moreno or some other gentleman of the city, hurried out at once to the beach accompanied by Don Antonio and several other gentlemen, just as Don Quixote was wheeling Rocinante round in order to take up the necessary distance. The Viceroy upon this, seeing that the pair of them were evidently preparing to come to the charge, put himself between them, asking them what it was that led them to engage in combat all of a sudden in this way. The Knight of the White Moon replied that it was a question of precedence of beauty, and briefly told them what he had said to Don Quixote, and how the conditions with defiance agreed upon on both sides had been accepted. The Viceroy went over to Don Antonio, and asked in a low voice did he know who the Knight of the White Moon was, or was it some joke they were playing on Don Quixote? Don Antonio replied that he neither knew who he was, nor whether the defiance was in joke or in earnest. This answer left the Viceroy in a state of perplexity, not knowing whether he ought to let the combat go on or not, but unable to persuade himself that it was anything but a joke. He fell back, saying, If there be no other way out of it, gallant knights, except to confess or die, and Don Quixote is inflexible, and your worship of the White Moon still more so, in God's hand be it, and fall on. He of the White Moon thanked the Viceroy in courteous and well-chosen words for the permission he gave them, and so did Don Quixote, who then, commending himself with all his heart to heaven and to his Dulcinea, as was his custom on the eve of any combat that awaited him, proceeded to take a little more distance, as he saw his antagonist was doing the same. Then, without blast of trumpet or other warlike instrument to give them the signal to charge, both at the same instant wheeled their horses, and he of the White Moon, being the swifter, met Don Quixote after having traversed 2/3 of the course, and there encountered him with such violence that without touching him with his lance, he hurled Don Quixote and Rocinante to the earth, a perilous fall. He sprang upon him at once, and placing the lance over his visor, said to him, You are vanquished, Sir Knight, nay dead unless you admit the conditions of our defiance. Don Quixote, bruised and stupefied, without raising his visor, said in a weak, feeble voice, as if he were speaking out of a tomb, Dulcinea del Toboso is the fairest woman in the world, and I the most unfortunate knight on earth. It is not fitting that this truth should suffer by my feebleness. Drive your lance home, Sir Knight, and take my life, since you have taken away my honor. That will I not, in sooth, said he of the White Moon. Live the fame of the Lady Dulcinea's beauty undimmed as ever. All I require is that the great Don Quixote retire to his own home for a year, or for so long a time as shall by me be enjoined upon him, as we agreed before engaging in this combat. The Viceroy, Don Antonio, and several others who were present heard all this, and heard too how Don Quixote replied that so long as nothing in prejudice of Dulcinea was demanded of him, he would observe all the rest like a true and loyal knight. The engagement given, he of the White Moon wheeled about, and making obeisance to the Viceroy with a movement of the head, rode away into the city at a half gallop. The Viceroy bade Don Antonio hasten after him, and by some means or other find out who he was. They raised Don Quixote up and uncovered his face, and found him pale and bathed with sweat. Rocinante, from the mere hard measure he had received, lay unable to stir from the present. Sancho, wholly dejected and woebegone, knew not what to say or do. He fancied that all was a dream, but that the whole business was a piece of enchantment. Here was his master defeated, and bound not to take up arms for a year. He saw the light of the glory of his achievements obscured. The hopes of the promises lately made him swept away like smoke before the wind. Rocinante, he feared, was crippled for life, and his master's bones out of joint. For if he were only shaken out of his madness, it would be no small luck. In the end, they carried him into the city in a hand chair which the viceroy sent for, and thither the viceroy himself returned, eager to ascertain who this knight of the White Moon was who had left Don Quixote in such a sad plight.
好，咁呢一節就出現咗一個 Don Quixote 嘅挑戰者啊！呢個騎士咧叫做 Knight of the White Moon。佢係趁住咩時候咧？就係趁住眾人喺海路出發去營救 Ana Felix 嘅呢個男伴嘅時候 ，Don Quixote 自己都想去拯救，但係咧就俾眾人勸退咗，因為始終呢個係一個海路上嘅戰鬥，就唔係陸地上啊。咁一個騎士佢都冇咩意思。Don Quixote 正當佢喺海灘上面發無聊賴咧，咁就遇上咗呢個騎士。而呢個騎士咧就提出一個條件，就係如果Don Quixote輸咗嘅話咧，佢就要1年放低佢嘅長矛，翻返鄉下度咧休息，就唔可以做 Knight Errant 嘅事啦。同埋咧，佢就要宣誓，但係佢個情人Dulcinea就唔係世上最靚嘅。而另一方面咧，如果呢個 White Moon 輸咗咧，佢所有嘢，包括佢嘅戰馬、佢嘅裝備、佢嘅人頭，全部都係屬於Don Quixote。咁大家同意咗呢個條件之後咧，就決鬥。而呢個 White Moon 嘅行動咧，實在係迅速，迅雷不及掩耳就將Don Quixote擊倒。咁而Don Quixote正當佢頭暈昏花嘅時候，向 White Moon 承諾咗，佢唔會喺呢一年間呢就再作任何騎士活動啦，除非Dulcinea要求，大多數都唔會㗎啦。White Moon 呢亦都記到好大量，就話呢個Dulcinea依然都可以係呢個世上最靚嘅人。但係你Don Quixote就唔可以再策騎1年啊！而 Sancho 咧亦都能夠相信見到佢眼前嘅主人咁樣被徹底擊倒，咁亦都意味住佢自己嘅揚名立萬就要再押後啦。呢個字有一個字同大家分享，呢個字都出現得幾多嘅一個副詞 hitherto hitherto Until now or until the point in time under discussion， 我哋中文會叫做迄今為止啊，直到而家為止。好，我呢節讀到呢度，下一次再大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote。我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第65節，呢一節嘅名叫做 Wherein is made known who the Knight of the White Moon was, likewise Don Gregorio's release and other events。上一回咧就講到 Don Quixote 俾一個叫做 White Moon 嘅騎士徹底擊敗，而令到 Don Quixote 必須要掛靴1年，翻去故鄉休息。暫時唔可以履行佢嘅遊俠精神，1年之後先至可以復出。呢個情況就令到 Sancho 都好憂傷，因為佢都要跟住主人翻去，佢咧都唔可以行俠仗義，唔可以榮華富貴啦。我哋睇下呢一節 Don Quixote 返鄉嘅路上會發生咩事。
Don Antonio Moreno followed the Knight of the White Moon, and a number of boys followed him too. Nay, pursued him, until they had him fairly housed in a hostel in the heart of the city. Don Antonio, eager to make his acquaintance, entered also. A squire came out to meet him and remove his armor, and he shut himself into a lower room, still attended by Don Antonio, whose bread would not bake until he had found out who he was. He of the White Moon, seeing then that the gentleman would not leave him, said, I know very well, Signor, what you have come for. It is to find out who I am. and as there is no reason why I should conceal it from you, while my servant here is taking off my armor, I will tell you the true state of the case without leaving out anything. You must know, Senor, that I am called the bachelor Samson Carrasco. I am of the same village as Don Quixote of La Mancha, whose craze and folly make all of us who know him feel pity for him, and I am one of those who have felt it most, and persuaded that his chance of recovery lay in quiet and keeping at home and in his own house. I hit upon a device for keeping him there. 3 months ago, therefore, I went out to meet him as a knight-errant, under the assumed name of the Knight of the Mirrors, intending to engage him in combat and overcome him without hurting him, making it the condition of our combat that the vanquished should be at the disposal of the victor. What I meant to demand of him was that he should return to his own village, and not leave it for a whole year, by which time he might be cured. But fate ordered it otherwise, for he vanquished me and unhorsed me, and so my plan failed. He went his way, and I came back conquered, covered with shame, and sorely bruised by my fall, which was a particularly dangerous one. But this did not quench my desire to meet him again and overcome him, as you have seen today. And as he is so scrupulous in his observance of the laws of knight-errantry, he will, no doubt, in order to keep his word, obey the injunction I have laid upon him. This, Senor, is how the matter stands, and I have nothing more to tell you. I implore of you not to betray me, or tell Don Quixote who I am, so that my honest endeavors may be successful, and that a man of excellent wits, were he only rid of the fooleries of chivalry, may get them back again. Oh, Senor, said Don Antonio, may God forgive you the wrong you have done the whole world in trying to bring the most amusing madman in it back to his senses. Do you not see, Senor, that the gain by Don Quixote's sanity can never equal the enjoyment his crazes give? But my belief is that all the Senor Bachelor's pain will be of no avail to bring a man so hopelessly cracked to his senses again. And if it were not uncharitable, I would say may Don Quixote never be cured, for by his recovery we lose not only his own drolleries, but his squire Sancho Panza's too, any one of which is enough to turn melancholy itself into merriment. However, I'll hold my peace and say nothing to him, and we'll see whether I am right in my suspicion that Senor Carrasco's efforts will be fruitless. The bachelor replied that at all events the affair promised well, and he hoped for a happy result from it, and putting his services at Don Antonio's commands, he took his leave of him, and having had his armor packed at once upon a mule, he rode away from the city the same day on the horse he rode to battle, and returned to his own country without meeting any adventure calling for record in this veracious history. Don Antonio reported to the viceroy what Carrasco told him, and the viceroy was not very well pleased to hear it, for with Don Quixote's retirement there was an end to the amusement of all who knew anything of his mad doings. 6 days did Don Quixote keep his bed, dejected, melancholy, moody, and out of sorts, brooding over the unhappy event of his defeat. Sancho strove to comfort him, and among other things he said to him, "Hold up your head, Senor, and be of good cheer if you can, and give thanks to heaven that if you have had a tumble to the ground, you have not come off with a broken rib. And as you know that where they give, they take, and that there are not always fletchers where there are pegs, a fig for the doctor, for there's no need of him to cure this ailment. Let us go home, and give over going about in search of adventures in strange lands and places, rightly looked at. It is I that am the greater loser, though it is your worship that has had the worse usage. With the government I gave up all wish to be a governor again, but I did not give up all longing to be a count, and that will never come to pass if your worship gives up becoming a king by renouncing the calling of chivalry, and so my hopes are going to turn into smoke." "Peace, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "Thou seest my suspension and retirement is not to exceed a year. I shall soon return to my honored calling, and I shall not be at a loss for a kingdom to win and a county to bestow on thee." "May God hear it and sin be death," said Sancho. "I have always heard say that a good hope is better than a bad holding." As they were talking, Don Antonio came in looking extremely pleased and exclaiming, "Reward me for my good news, Senor Don Quixote. Don Gregorio and the renegade who went for him have come ashore. Ashore, do I say? They are by this time in the Viceroy's house, and will be here immediately. Don Quixote cheered up a little and said, Of a truth, I am almost ready to say I should have been glad had it turned out just the other way, for it would have obliged me to cross over to Barbary, where by the might of my arm I should have restored to liberty not only Don Gregorio, but all the Christian captives there are in Barbary. But what am I saying? Miserable being that I am. Am I not he that has been conquered? Am I not he that has been overthrown? Am I not he who must not take up arms for a year? Then what am I making professions for? What am I bragging about, when it is fitter for me to handle the distaff than the sword? No more of that, senor, said Sancho. Let the hand live, even though it be with her pip. Today for thee and tomorrow for me. In these affairs of encounters and whacks one must not mind them, for he that falls today may get up tomorrow, unless indeed he chooses to lie in bed. I mean gives way to weakness and does not pluck up fresh spirit for fresh battles. Let your worship get up now to receive Don Gregorio, for the household seems to be in a bustle, and no doubt he has come by this time. And so it proved, for as soon as Don Gregorio and the renegade had given the Viceroy an account of the voyage out and home, Don Gregorio, eager to see Ana Felix, came with the renegade to Don Antonio's house. When they carried him away from Algiers, he was in woman's dress. On board the vessel, however, he exchanged it for that of a captive who escaped with him. But in whatever dress he might be, he looked like one to be loved and served and esteemed, for he was surpassingly well favored, and to judge by appearances, some 17 or 18 years of age. Ricote and his daughter came out to welcome him, the father with tears, the daughter with bashfulness. They did not embrace each other, for where there is deep love, there will never be overmuch boldness. Seen side by side, the comeliness of Don Gregorio and the beauty of Ana Felix were the admiration of all who were present. It was silence that spoke for the lovers at that moment, and their eyes were the tongues that declared their pure and happy feelings. The renegade explained the measures and means he had adopted to rescue Don Gregorio, and Don Gregorio, at no great length, but in a few words in which he showed that his intelligence was in advance of his years, described the peril and embarrassment he found himself in among the women with whom he had sojourned. To conclude, Ricote liberally recompensed and rewarded as well the renegade as the men who had rowed, and the renegade effected his readmission into the body of the church and was reconciled with it, and from a rotten limb became by penance and repentance a clean and sound one. 2 days later, the Viceroy discussed with Don Antonio the steps they should take to enable Ana Felix and her father to stay in Spain, for it seemed to them there could be no objection to a daughter who was so good a Christian and a father to all appearance so well disposed remaining there. Don Antonio offered to arrange the matter at the capital, whither he was compelled to go on some other business, hinting that many a difficult affair was settled there with the help of favor and bribes. Nay, said Ricote, who was present during the conversation, it will not do to rely upon favor or bribes, because with the great Don Bernardino de Velasco, Conde de Salazar, to whom His Majesty has entrusted our expulsion, neither entreaties nor promises, bribes nor appeals to compassion are of any use. For though it is true he mingles mercy with justice, still, seeing that the whole body of our nation is tainted and corrupt, he applies it to the cautery that burns rather than the salve that soothes. And thus, by prudence, sagacity, care, and the fear he inspires, he has borne to his mighty shoulders the weight of this great policy and carried it into effect, all our schemes and plots, importunities and wiles, being ineffectual to blind his Argus eyes, ever on the watch lest one of us should remain behind in concealment, and like a hidden root come in course of time to sprout and bear poisonous fruit in Spain, now cleansed, and relieved of the fear in which our vast numbers kept it. Heroic resolve of the great Philip III, and unparalleled wisdom to have entrusted it to the said Don Bernardino de Velasco. At any rate, said Don Antonio, when I am there, I will make all possible efforts, and let heaven do as pleases it best. Don Gregorio will come with me to relieve the anxiety which his parents must be suffering on account of his absence, Ana Felix will remain in my house with my wife or in a monastery, and I know the viceroy will be glad that the worthy Ricote should stay with him until we see what terms I can make. The viceroy agreed to all that was proposed, but Don Gregorio, on learning what had passed, declared he could not and would not on any account leave Ana Felix. However, as it was his purpose to go and see his parents and devise some way of returning for her, he fell in with the proposed arrangement. Ana Felix remained with Don Antonio's wife and Ricote in the viceroy's house. The day for Don Antonio's departure came, and 2 days later that for Don Quixote's and Sancho's. For Don Quixote's fall did not suffer him to take the road sooner. There were tears and sighs, swoonings and sobs, at the parting between Don Gregorio and Ana Felix. Ricote offered Don Gregorio 1,000 crowns if he would have them, but he would not take any save 5, which Don Antonio lent him, and he promised to repay at the capital. So the two of them took their departure, and Don Quixote and Sancho afterwards. As has been already said, Don Quixote without his armor and in traveling gear, and Sancho on foot, Dapple being loaded with the armor.
好，呢一節就嚟到呢一度，Don Quixote同 Sancho 終於都要上路返鄉下啦。鄉下之前發生咗兩件事，第一就係佢哋嘅好朋友 Don Antonio 就揾人去查出咗 White Moon 騎士佢嘅真正身份，原來佢就係學者學生 Samson Carrasco。Samson Carrasco 喺前段已經出現過㗎啦，佢咧就係多次出現去阻撓嘅一個學者。佢原本係一個粉絲嚟嘅，但係咧就變咗一個阻礙住 Don Quixote 履行佢嘅遊俠精神嘅一個人。今次就直接同佢交鋒，就將佢擊敗，藉此就希望醫治好 Don Quixote 嘅遊俠精神病。咁但係當然 Don Antonio 又好，單獨又好，都對呢一個行為係不齒嘅。佢哋覺得 Don Quixote 咁樣有幻想啊，有咁浪漫，都為大家帶嚟歡笑，幾咁好咧！你咁樣做咪盞令到大家唔開心咁。但係咧，佢應承咗呢個 Samson Carrasco 係唔會揭露佢嘅身份嘅。另一方面就係 Ana Felix 營救咗 Don Gregorio 翻嚟。原本咧 Gregorio 都係着住女人衫嘅，咁但係就換翻做男仔衫。咁佢呢一刻決定咧陪阿 Don Antonio 或者 Don Antonio 帶住 Don Gregorio 係翻去探望佢嘅父母親先，然之後咧先再決定點樣同 Ana 繼續佢嘅前緣。咁就係因為咧 Ana 同埋佢嘅爸爸 Ricote 始終唔係西班牙人，佢哋係 Moorish。而西班牙係有呢一個規矩，喺嗰個年代係唔可以有任何 Moorish 喺個國土上面，即係除非你使咗啲錢搞啲關係啊咁樣啦，先可以留喺度。而 Antonio 咧亦都有提出可以咁做，咁但係咧 Ricote 就細神譬如就唔可以，呢啲都係規矩，佢哋會尊重都會遵守嘅。佢哋都係會決定離開啊，或者去一啲偏遠啲嘅城啊，或者去直情離開西班牙，都未真正決定咗要點樣做嘅，暫時咧就要離開先。原本 Gregorio 都好唔情願同 Ana 分開一段時間嘅，咁但係既然知道係要翻去同父母匯報啦，令佢心安啦，佢哋都冇所謂啦。不過重點咧就係呢度啦 ，Don Quixote 已經失去咗佢嘅騎士身份，起碼喺1年之內，佢應承咗 White Moon 騎士，咁啊呢一刻咧就要履行，就要翻鄉下啦。好，我哋睇下呢節有啲咩字同大家分享。Sojourn S-O-J-O-U-R-N 名詞嚟嘅，都可以用動詞解釋嘅。名詞意思係 a temporary stay， 動詞係 stay somewhere temporarily， 其實都係同一個意思咧，即係暫留啦，暫時停留。Cautery C-A-U-T-E-R-Y 名詞嚟嘅 ，an instrument or a caustic substance used for cauterizing。caustic 或者 cauterize 即係一啲會腐蝕、會侵蝕嘅嘢。嗰喺文中 Ricote 講咗一段好長嘅發言，其實咧就係話佢唔想呢啲咁嘅賄賂呢啲咁嘅使錢啊，而令到佢哋留喺西班牙，影響咗佢哋嘅民風。佢唔想咗去侵蝕咗佢哋嘅民風，於是乎咧就阻止 Antonio 去咁做。佢哋願意自行離開。好，我哋呢節講到呢度，下次再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。 讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第66節，呢一節嘅名叫做 Which treats of what he who reads will see, or what he who has it read to him will hear。呢一節就繼續講 Don Quixote 同 Sancho 回到家鄉嘅路上，點解 Don Quixote 要拋低佢嘅冒險回鄉呢？就因為佢喺決鬥上面打輸咗，俾一個神秘嘅騎士叫做 White Moon， 而神秘騎士嘅真正身份就係學者 Carrasco。之前呢已經交手過啦，其實知道對方係咩人嚟嘅，不過呢一刻 Don Quixote 係唔知道呢個 White Moon 係咩人。好，我哋繼續睇落去啦。呢個傷心嘅回家路上，究竟會發生咩事
？As he left Barcelona, Don Quixote turned gaze upon the spot where he had fallen. Here Troy was, said he. Here my ill luck, not my cowardice, robbed me of all the glory I had won. Here fortune made me the victim of her caprices. Here the luster of my achievements was dimmed. Here, in a word, fell my happiness, never to rise again. Signor, said Sancho on hearing this, it is the part of brave hearts to be patient in adversity just as much as to be glad in prosperity. I judge by myself, for if when I was a governor I was glad, now that I am a squire and on foot I am not sad. And I have heard say that she whom commonly they call fortune is a drunken whimsical jade, and what is more, blind, and therefore neither sees what she does, nor knows whom she casts down or whom she sets up. Thou art a great philosopher, Sancho, said Don Quixote. Thou speakest very sensibly. I know not who taught thee, but I can tell thee there is no such thing as fortune in the world, nor does anything which takes place there, be it good or bad, come about by chance, but by the special preordination of heaven, and hence the common saying that each of us is the maker of his own fortune. I have been that of mine, but not with the proper amount of prudence, and my self-confidence has therefore made me pay dearly, for I ought to have reflected that Rocinante's feeble strength could not resist the mighty bulk of the Knight of the White Moon's horse. In a word, I ventured it. I did my best. I was overthrown, but though I lost my honor, I did not lose, nor can I lose the virtue of keeping my word. When I was a knight-errant, daring and valiant, I supported my achievements by hand and deed. And now that I am a humble squire, I will support my words by keeping the promise I have given. Forward then, Sancho my friend, let us go to keep the year of the novitiate in our own country, and in that seclusion we shall pick up fresh strength to return to the by me never forgotten calling of arms. Signor, returned Sancho, travelling on foot is not such a pleasant thing that it makes me feel disposed or tempted to make long marches. Let us leave this armor hung up on some tree, instead of someone that has been hanged, and then with me on Dapple's back and my feet off the ground, we will arrange the stages as your worship pleases to measure them out. But to suppose that I am going to travel on foot and make long ones is to suppose nonsense. Thou sayest well, Sancho, said Don Quixote. Let my armor be hung up for a trophy, and under it or round it we will carve on the trees what was inscribed on the trophy of Roland's armor. These let none move, who dareth not his might with Roland prove. That's the very thing, said Sancho, and if it was not that we should feel the want of Rocinante on the road, it would be as well to leave him hung up too. And yet I had rather not have either him or the armor hung up, said Don Quixote, that it may not be said, for good service a bad return. Your worship is right, said Sancho, for, as sensible people hold, the fault of the ass must not be laid on the pack saddle, and, as in this affair the fault is your worship's, punish yourself and don't let your anger break out against the already battered and bloody armor, or the meekness of Rocinante, or the tenderness of my feet, trying to make them travel more than is reasonable. In converse of this sort, the whole of that day went by, as did the 4 succeeding ones, without anything occurring to interrupt their journey. But on the 5th, as they entered a village, they found a great number of people at the door of an inn enjoying themselves, as it was a holiday. Upon Don Quixote's approach, a peasant called out, "One of these 2 gentlemen who come here, and who don't know the parties, will tell us what we ought to do about our wager. That I will certainly, said Don Quixote, and according to the rights of the case, if I can manage to understand it. Well, here it is, worthy sir, said the peasant. A man of this village who is so fat that he weighs 20 stone challenged another, a neighbor of his, who does not weigh more than 9, to run a race. The agreement was that they were to run a distance of 100 paces with equal weights. And when the challenger was asked how the weights were to be equalized, he said that the other, as he weighed 9 stone, should put 11 in iron on his back, and that in this way the 20 stone of the thin man would equal the 20 stone of the fat one. Not at all, exclaimed Sancho at once, before Don Quixote could answer. It is for me, that only a few days ago left off being a governor and a judge, as all the world knows, to settle these doubtful questions and give an opinion in disputes of all sorts. Answer in God's name, Sancho, my friend, said Don Quixote, for I am not fit to give crumbs to a cat. My wits are so confused and upset. With this permission, Sancho said to the peasants who stood clustered round him, waiting with open mouths for the decision to come from his, brothers, what the fat man requires is not in reason, nor has it a shadow of justice in it. Because if it be true, as they say, that the challenged may choose the weapons, the other has no right to choose such as will prevent and keep him from winning. My decision, therefore, is that the fat challenger prune, heal, thin, trim, and correct himself, and take 11 stone of his flesh off his body, here and there, as he pleases, and as suits him best. And being in this way reduced to 9 stone weight, he will make himself equal and even with 9 stone of his opponent, and they will be able to run on equal terms. By all that's good, said one of the peasants as he heard Sancho's decision. But the gentleman has spoken like a saint, and given judgment like a canon. But I'll be bound the fat man won't part with an ounce of his flesh, not to say 11 stone. The best plan will be for them not to run, said another, so that neither the thin man break down under the weight, nor the fat one strip himself of his flesh. Let half the wager be spent in wine, and let's take these gentlemen to the tavern where there's the best, and over me be the cloak when it rains. I thank you, sirs, said Don Quixote, but I cannot stop for an instant, for sad thoughts and unhappy circumstances force me to seem discourteous and to travel apace. And sparing Rocinante, he pushed on, leaving them wondering at what they had seen and heard, at his own strange figure and at the shrewdness of his servant, for such they took Sancho to be. And another of them observed, if the servant is so clever, what must the master be? I'll bet, if they're going to Salamanca to study, they'll come to be alcaides of the court in a trice, for it's a mere joke, only to read, and have interest and good luck. And before a man knows where he is, he finds himself with a staff in his hand or a mitre on his head. That night, master and man passed out in the fields in the open air, and the next day, as they were pursuing their journey, they saw coming towards them a man on foot, with a forehorse at the neck and a javelin or spike staff in his hand, the very cut of a foot courier, who, as soon as he came close to Don Quixote, increased his pace, and half running came up to him, and embracing his right thigh, for he could reach no higher, exclaimed with evident pleasure, O Signor Don Quixote of La Mancha, what happiness it will be to the heart of my lord the Duke when he knows your worship is coming back to his castle, for he is still there with my lady the Duchess. I do not recognize you, friend, said Don Quixote, nor do I know who you are, unless you tell me. I am Tosilos, my lord the Duke's lackey. Signor Don Quixote, replied the courier, he who refused to fight your worship about marrying the daughter of Dona Rodriguez. God bless me, exclaimed Don Quixote. Is it possible that you are the one whom mine enemies, the enchanters, changed into the lackey you speak of in order to rob me of the honor of that battle? Nonsense, good sir, said the messenger. There was no enchantment or transformation at all. I entered the list just as much lackey Tosilos as I came out of them lackey Tosilos. I thought to marry without fighting, for the girl had taken my fancy, but my scheme had a very different result. For as soon as your worship had left the castle, my lord the Duke had 100 strokes of the stick given me for having acted contrary to the orders he gave me before engaging in the combat. At the end of the whole affair is that the girl has become a nun, and Dona Rodriguez has gone back to Castile, and I am now on my way to Barcelona with a packet of letters for the Viceroy, which my master is sending him. If your worship would like a drop, sound though warm, I have a gourd here full of the best, and some scrap of Tronchen cheese that will serve as a provocative and wakener of your thirst, if so be it is asleep. I take the offer, said Sancho. No more compliments about it. Pour out, good Tosilos, in spite of all the enchanters in the Indies. Thou art indeed the greatest glutton in the world, Sancho, said Don Quixote, and the greatest booby on earth, not to be able to see that this courier is enchanted and this Tosilos a sham one. Stop with him and take thy fill. I will go on slowly and wait for thee to come up with me. The lackey laughed, unsheathed his gourd, unwalleted his scraps, and taking out a small loaf of bread, he and Sancho seated themselves on the green grass, and in peace and good fellowship finished off the contents of their alforjas down to the bottom, so resolutely that they licked the wrapper of the letters merely because it smelled of cheese. Said Tosilos to Sancho, Beyond a doubt, Sancho, my friend, this master of thine ought to be a madman. Ought, said Sancho. He owes no man anything. He pays for everything, particularly when the coin is madness. I see it plain enough, and I tell him so plain enough, but what's the use, especially now that it is all over with him, for here he is beaten by the Knight of the White Moon. Tosilos begged him to explain what had happened to him, but Sancho replied that it would not be good manners to leave his master waiting for him, and that some other day, if they met, there would be time enough for that. And then getting up, after shaking his doublet and brushing the crumbs out of his beard, he drove Dapple on before him, and bidding adieu to Tosilos, left him and rejoined his master, who was waiting for him under the shade of a tree.
好，呢一節就讀完啦。喺回程路上，當 Quixote 同 Sancho 原本都過咗幾日相安無事日子嘅，直到5日之後發生咗小插曲。第一 part 就主要講 Sancho 試圖幫 Don Quixote 開脫，就話呢啲都係運嘅問題，我哋係因為唔好運咪輸咯。但係 Don Quixote 就堅持唔係淨係運咁簡單，上天嘅眷顧啦，同埋你自己做嘅事咧就要自己承擔，承認咧自己唔夠小心，做得唔夠好，於是乎咧佢就要蒙羞。之後就入到一條村莊，咁啊有個旅館。旅館入邊咧就有一班人，一班男士就喺度嘈吵啲咩咧？有關一個賽事，就一個身材好肥胖嘅男人同一個身材好瘦削嘅咧就要賽跑，咁但係大家咧就就住個體重唔對等咧，咁就爭吵起上嚟。希望當 Quixote 佢哋咧主要做個證人，俾下意見咁。咁 Sancho 俾咗好多意見，佢咧就話：與其你哋想瘦削嘅男子去加磅，去同個肥人跑，不如叫個肥人去減肥，咁唔係更加兩全其美咩？咁眾人都稱讚 Sancho 獨具慧眼，咁但係當 Quixote 就冇乜興趣離開咗。之後咧，佢喺路上又遇到另外一個人。呢個就表明身份，佢就係之前伯爵家入面嘅一個下人啊，叫 Tosilos， 就係佢咧負責臨陣出場，就同 Don Quixote 對決。但係咧佢之後見到旅館家個女咁靚，就決定反悔啦，就當場放棄決鬥，就娶你為妻。呢個 Tosilos 就話啦：Don Quixote 你唔知啦。都係離開咗城堡之後咧，個伯爵就即刻將 Tosilos 打咗一身，叫呢個旅館家個女去修道院就出家。而呢個 Tosilos 亦都同 Don Quixote 講，根本從來都冇咩魔法，冇咩巫術，佢一直都係佢，就係原本應該聽伯爵嘅指揮咧，就同 Don Quixote決鬥，但係佢就冇咁做，於是乎咧就俾人打身咯。咁 Don Quixote 就拒絕相信呢個係同魔法冇關嘅。反而阿 Sancho 就因為好肚餓啊，就同 Tosilos 大吃一頓，都言談甚歡嘅。咁 Sancho 同埋 Don Quixote 亦都繼續生活。咁我哋睇下呢一字有啲咩自然打分啊 ？Caprice C-A-P-R-I-C-E 呢個字咧成日都會見到。名詞 A sudden and unaccountable change of mood or behaviour。主要嘅解釋咧就係話，一個人反覆無常，一個性情上啊，又或者佢嘅好心血來潮，有啲好突然嘅轉變啊。 咁另外一個解釋咧就係指一啲作品啊，啲好生動啊、有趣啊、好豐富幻想力一啲奇想作啊、狂想曲啊諸如此類。Preordination Preordination Preordination 名詞 The action of determining an outcome or course of action in advance 係一啲預測、推測、預定、預測。Novitiate Novitiate 呢個比較少見。名詞 The period or state of being a novice, especially in a religious order 一個見習生，通常係同宗教有關啊，一個見習師啊，諸如此類。咁但喺文中呢個 novitiate 係一個見習生。好，我哋呢一節讀到呢度，下一次再同大家讀你聽，拜拜。大家好，讀你聽嘅時間，今日繼續讀 Miguel de Cervantes 嘅 Don Quixote， 我哋讀到 Part 2嘅第67節，呢一節叫做 Of the resolution Don Quixote formed to turn shepherd and take to a life in the fields while the year for which he had given his word was running its course, with other events truly delectable and happy。睇題目就見到 Don Quixote 咧，回歸田園舞龍，但係咪先前同 White Moon 騎士決鬥啦，然之後打輸咗，應承咗咧要1年間放低佢嘅長矛，放棄做遊客1年之後先至可以歸。呢一刻 Don Quixote 同 Sancho 嘅鬥志並未磨滅，佢哋依然咧都係期待住1年之後重振雄風，捲土重來。但係呢段時間1年之間都仲係要去度過嘅，作者咧亦都要着墨呢1年發生咩事。咁我哋睇下發生咗啲咩事咧。
If a multitude of reflections used to harass Don Quixote before he had been overthrown, a great many more harassed him since his fall. He was under the shade of a tree. As has been said, and there, like flies on honey, thoughts came crowding upon him and stinging him. Some of them turned upon the disenchantment of Dulcinea, others upon the life he was about to lead in his unforced retirement. Sancho came up and spoke in high praise of the generous disposition of the lackey Tosilos. Is it possible, Sancho, said Don Quixote, that thou dost still think that he yonder is the real lackey? Apparently it has escaped thy memory that thou hast seen Dulcinea turned and transformed into a peasant wench, and the knight of the mirrors into the bachelor Carrasco, all the work of the enchanters that persecute me. But tell me now, didst thou ask this Tosilos, as thou callest him, what has become of Altisidora? Did she weep over my absence, or has she already consigned to oblivion the love thoughts that used to afflict her when I was present? The thoughts that I had, said Sancho, were not such as to leave time for asking foolish questions. Body o' me, senor, is your worship in a condition now to inquire into other people's thoughts, above all love thoughts? Look ye, Sancho, said Don Quixote, there is a great difference between what is done out of love and what is done out of gratitude. A knight may very possibly be proof against love, but it is impossible, strictly speaking, for him to be ungrateful. Altisidora, to all appearance, loved me truly. She gave me the 3 kerchiefs thou knowest of. She wept at my departure. She cursed me, she abused me. Casting shame to the winds, she bewailed herself in public, all signs that she adored me. For the wrath of lovers always ends in curses. I had no hopes to give her, nor treasures to offer her, for mine are given to Dulcinea, and the treasures of knight-errant are like those of the fairies, illusory and deceptive. All I can give her is the place in my memory I keep for her, without prejudice, however, to that which I hold devoted to Dulcinea, whom thou art wronging by thy remissness in whipping thyself and scourging that flesh. Would that I saw it eaten by wolves, which would rather keep itself for the worms than for the relief of that poor lady. Senor, replied Sancho, if the truth is to be told, I cannot persuade myself that the whipping of my backside has anything to do with the disenchantment of the enchanted. It is like saying, if your head aches, rub ointment on your knees. At any rate, I'll make bold to swear that in all the histories dealing with knight-errantry that your worship has read, you have never come across anybody disenchanted by whipping. But whether or no, I'll whip myself when I have a fancy for it, and the opportunity serves for scourging myself comfortably. God grant it, said Don Quixote, and heaven give thee grace to take it to heart, and own the obligation thou art under to help my lady, who is thine also, inasmuch as thou art mine. As they pursued their journey talking in this way, they came to the very same spot where they had been trampled on by the bulls. Don Quixote recognized it, and said he to Sancho, "This is the meadow where we came upon those gay shepherdesses and gallant shepherds who were trying to revive and imitate the pastoral Arcadia there, an idea as novel as it was happy, in emulation whereof. If so be thou dost approve of it, Sancho, I would have ourselves turn shepherds, at any rate for the time I have to live in retirement. I will buy some ewes and everything else requisite for the pastoral calling, and I under the name of the shepherd Quixotes, and thou as the shepherd Panzino. We will roam the woods and groves and meadows singing songs here, lamenting in elegies there, drinking of the crystal waters of the spring or limpid brooks or flowing rivers. The oaks will yield us their sweet fruit with bountiful hand, the trunks of the hard-cork trees a seat, the willow shade, the roses perfume, the widespread meadows carpets tinted with 1,000 dyes. The clear pure air will give us breath. The moon and stars lighten the darkness of the night for us. Song shall be our delight, lamenting our joy. Apollo will supply us with verses, and love with conceits whereby we shall make ourselves famed forever, not only in this, but in ages to come." "Agate," said Sancho, "but that sort of life squares, nay corners, with my notions. And what is more, the bachelor Samson Carrasco and Master Nicholas the barber won't have well seen it before they'll want to follow it and turn shepherds along with us. And God grant it may not come into the curate's head to join the sheepfold too. He's so jovial and fond of enjoying himself." "Thou art in the right of it, Sancho," said Don Quixote. "And the bachelor Samson Carrasco, if he enters the pastoral fraternity, as no doubt he will, may call himself the shepherd Samsonino, or perhaps the shepherd Carrascan. Nicholas the barber may call himself Niculuso, as old Boscan formerly was called Nemoroso. As for the curate, I don't know what name we can fit to him unless it be something derived from his title, and we call him the shepherd Curiambro. For the shepherdesses whose lovers we shall be, we can pick names as we would hares, and as my lady's name does just as well for a shepherdesses for a princesses, I need to trouble myself to look for one that will suit her better. To thine, Sancho, thou canst give what name thou wilt." "I don't mean to give her any but Tirasona," said Sancho, "which will go well with her stoutness and with her own right name, as she is called Teresa. And then when I sing her praises in my verses, I'll show how chaste my passion is, for I'm not going to look for better bread than ever came from wheat in other men's houses. It won't do for the curate to have a shepherdess, for the sake of good example, and if the bachelor chooses to have one, that is his lookout." "God bless me, Sancho, my friend," said Don Quixote. "What a life we shall lead! What hautboys and Zamora bagpipes we shall hear! What tabors, timbrels, and rebecks! And then if among all these different sorts of music that of the albogs is heard, almost all the pastoral instruments will be there." "What are albogs?" asked Sancho, "for I never in my life heard tell of them or saw them." "Albogs," said Don Quixote, "are brass plates like candlesticks that struck against one another on the hollow side make a noise which, if not very pleasing or harmonious, is not disagreeable and accords very well with the root notes of the bagpipe and tabor. The word albog is Morisco, as are all those in our Spanish tongue that begin with al. For example, almohaza, almoza, alhombra, alguacil, alcima, almazan, alcanzia, and others of the same sort, of which there are not many more. Our language has only 3 that are Morisco and end in I, which are Borsacri, Sacrisami, and Maravedi. Our Heli and Alvacri are seen to be Arabic, as well by the al at the beginning as by the I they end with. I mention this incidentally, the chance allusion to albogs having reminded me of it, and it will be of great assistance to us in the perfect practice of this calling that I am something of a poet, as thou knowest, and that besides the bachelor Samson Carrasco is an accomplished one. Of the curate I say nothing, but I will wager he has some spice of the poet in him, and no doubt Master Nicholas too, for all barbers, or most of them, are guitar players and stringers of verses. I will bewail my separation. Thou shalt glorify thyself as a constant lover. The shepherd Carrascan will figure as a rejected one, and the curate Piriambro as whatever may please him best, and so all will go as gaily as heart could wish. To this Sancho made answer, I am so unlucky, Signor, that I am afraid the day will never come when I'll see myself at such a calling. Oh, what neat spoons I'll make when I am shepherd! What messes, creams, garlands, pastoral odds and ends! And if they don't get me a name for wisdom, they'll not fail to get me one for ingenuity. My daughter Sanchica will bring us our dinner to the pasture. But stay, she's good-looking, and shepherds there are with more mischief than simplicity in them. I would not have her come for wool and go back shorn. Love-making and lawless desires are just as common in the fields as in the cities, and in shepherds' shanties as in royal palaces. Do away with the cause. You do away with the sin. If eyes don't see, hearts don't break, and better a clear escape than good men's prayers. A truce to thy proverbs, Sancho, exclaimed Don Quixote. Any one of those thou hast uttered would suffice to explain thy meaning. Many a time have I recommended thee not to be so lavish with proverbs, and to exercise some moderation in delivering them. But it seems to me it is only preaching in the desert. My mother beats me, and I go on with my tricks. It seems to me, said Sancho, that your worship is like the common saying, set the frying pan to the kettle, get away, black breech. You chide me for uttering proverbs, and you string them in couples yourself. Observe, Sancho, replied Don Quixote, I bring in proverbs to the purpose, and when I quote them, they fit like a ring to the finger. Thou bringest them in by the head and shoulders, in such a way that thou dost drag them in, rather than introduce them. If I am not mistaken, I have told thee already that proverbs are short maxims drawn from the experience and observation of our wise men of old. But the proverb that is not to the purpose is a piece of nonsense and not a maxim. But enough of this. As nightfall is drawing on, let us retire some little distance from the high road and pass the night. What is in store for us tomorrow, God knoweth. They turned aside and supped late and poorly, very much against Sancho's will, who turned over in his mind the hardships attendant upon knight-errantry in woods and forests, even though at times plenty presented itself in castles and houses, as at Don Diego de Miranda's, at the wedding of Camacho the Rich, and at Don Antonio Moreno's. He reflected, however, that it could not be always day, nor always night, and so that night he passed in sleeping, and his master in waking.
好，呢個短暫嘅一節讀完啦。仕途兩人原來都仲未度過呢一年，佢哋只係籌劃緊未來呢一年佢哋用咩身份去度過。即逢二人經過一塊小平地啦，就記得佢哋曾經呢度遇上咗一班假扮牧羊者。當佢哋就靈機一觸就話：咦，不如嚟緊呢一年我哋改名換姓去做牧羊者啦！我哋仲可以揾啲女牧羊主，我哋一齊牧羊添。大家就喺度討論下啲各啲名啊，各樣嘢啊。Sancho 都話：我唔會揾其他人噶啦，只揾我太太噶啦。當佢哋就話：其實咁樣都幾好啊，係我哋周圍都係一啲好美好嘅資源，咁好嘅環境啦，又可以唱下詩歌啊，又可以玩下樂器啊。Sancho 話：你玩咩樂器啊？咁就講一輪，到最尾咧就話：我哋都係唔好胡思亂想咁多啦，都係喺度借宿一宵先啦。佢哋就食咗啲好簡陋嘅嘢喺荒地度嚟度過埋。咁喺佢哋有呢個對話之前，當 Quixote 有一啲回想，佢諗起 Altisidora 就係之前喺伯爵家入面其中之一個女僕，佢真心向當 Quixote 喺示愛過人，而當 Quixote 亦都係知道嘅。但係當 Quixote 就車嘆啦，即係佢嘅心已經係屬於 Dulcinea 啦，咁所以佢唔可以接受。佢就問 Sancho：咦，頭先你哋遇到嗰個男僕 Tosilos， 佢有冇提過Altisidora 近況咧？Sancho 當然就都冇點留意啦。 咁而Don Quixote另一方面想催促阿 Sancho， 喂，你快啲鞭你自己，你鞭咗你自己就可以解除咗 Dulcinea 嘅魔咒噶啦。但係 Sancho 同阿 Don Quixote 講，你講呢啲嘢根本就係唔係嗰回事。但係如果你真係有想要我做咁做嘅，總之我有一日覺得我真係應該做啦，我先至做 Don Quixote 咧，都叫做安慰咗一下啦。好，呢一節有一個字同大家分享 ，elegy E-L-E-G-Y 名詞 ，a poem of serious reflection, typically a lament for the dead， 哀歌啦、挽歌啦，唱俾逝去咗嘅人，係一啲詩歌。好，我哋呢一節翻到呢度，下一節再同大家讀嚟聽，拜拜。